The hype train for Star Wars Acolyte is beginning, but alongside the hype, there are some concerns. Welcome to Star Wars Uplink. It seems like with every single Star Wars project that the concerns start flooding in. The theories on what's going to fail, why this is going to fail, when this is not going to fail, all of that fun stuff. But I saw this one theory, hypothetical piece on what the real struggle with Star Wars Acolyte's going to be. And I've been seeing a couple of threads alongside this, and it comes down to what happens if we know more about the Sith. We could see more of the Sith, and it's going to take away the cool factor of the Sith. I want to talk about this. The article is around this idea that Star Wars is fundamentally a mysterious piece of media. When they're working on the movies, we don't hear anything. We just get theories. We don't see any of the behind the scenes unless it's through leaked images. That's the kind of thing that people expect to see with Star Wars projects. And I want to talk about why this specific concern around Star Wars Acolyte I just don't think is going to be applicable to Star Wars Acolyte. Because I think if you look at Legends, we see so much of the Sith. We see so many examples of different powerful Sith. We see the height of Sith power where they can suck the energy of an entire planet and use that towards fueling their own power. We see smaller examples of this. We see interpretations of not just the Sith power, but the dark side in and of itself. When you look at something like Abeloth and the corruption around Abeloth, you see a lot of these different pieces. And if we compare this to canon, I think it's fair of like, if you're only looking at canon, yeah, it could take away the mystery of the Sith. I don't think that's the real problem with Star Wars Acolyte, and I don't think we should be looking at that as the problem with Star Wars Acolyte. As we get further into Star Wars Expanded Universe, the shows, the movies, the TV, animated stuff, the books, the comics, the video games, we're going to see and learn more about so much more. But the difference here with Star Wars Acolyte is it's in the High Republic era. It's not the prequel trilogy. It's 200 years before the prequel trilogy even begins. And that's the real strength of something like Star Wars Acolyte. They can tell these stories of the Sith, of the dark side users, without necessarily impacting anything else. I think these days, with movies trying to be as big as humanly possible, as surefire lands as they possibly can, with them looking at all of the spreadsheets and all of the surveys and all of the different analytics that they have, I think it's fair to criticize and be skeptical around future things with any of the big franchises. I don't think the concern that you should have for Star Wars Acolyte is actually around the Sith. I think the real concern is around the Jedi, surprisingly. When you look at it, Star Wars has, up until this point, very much been an underdog versus the big power kind of story. You have the rebellion up against the Empire, and in the prequel trilogy, honestly, you have the Republic versus the Separatists, and the Separatists far and away outnumber the Republic. And obviously that changes with the introductions of the clones, but in that story, it is underdog versus the big behemoth of the droids. And you look at Luke versus the Empire, that's definitely true with him in the Rebellion. And even in the sequels, you have the Resistance versus the First Order, which is the new big bad and big power in the galaxy. So you have lesser power versus bigger, stronger power. And in all of those cases, you have the dark side with a typically a big upper hand. They have the strength, they have the power, they have the numbers. But in this time frame, in the High Republic era, you have a time where the Jedi are at the height of their power. This is 200 years before the real plans laid by Palpatine are even thought of with the Phantom Menace. This is a new time frame where the Jedi are now further in the galaxy than has ever been previous. They have more strength, they have more control, there are just more Jedi. And the Sith are very clearly the underdog here, and we're seeing this story, hypothetically, theoretically, from what we've seen, reportedly from all of the reports and leaks and rumors and everything. This is a story told from the dark side user's perspective, or at least someone who clings to the idea of the dark side. And the villains are going to be the Jedi. The big power in the galaxy are the Jedi here. And that's just really unique. But there are some ways that could go wrong. I think you need to show the good with the Jedi while also contrasting it with its own faults, which that's the whole core of what the prequel trilogy is trying to say. Is like, hey, the Jedi, yeah, they did a lot of good in the galaxy, but once they became tools of war, they started to show the cracks that have always been there. You need to start alluding to that. You need to see any time that you have one group that thinks they're better than another group, that is where the strife and the hatred come from. This feeling of superiority. And I think they can get a lot into that with this idea of a story told from the dark side user's perspective. And I think that's what I'm most interested in, honestly, is seeing how well they can do that, especially after something like Andor. I think they need to emulate more Andor in the Star Wars Acolyte show than they do anything else in Star Wars, because Andor really shows, like, when Dedra Meero is in the room trying to fight for her point, you are rooting for her. She is the good guy in that moment. You're trying to, like, overcome the bureaucracy, overcome the sexism, overcome all of these things that are put up against her. And then she gets in that position, you're like, oh crap, actually she's kind of evil. I don't know how to feel now. And you look at Andor, who ultimately brings down the destruction of the Death Star. He's not necessarily a squeaky clean kind of guy. I mean, he's doing it out of what he feels is necessity, but he's not the good guy that we've come to expect on a lead character. I mean, we get introduced to him killing two people, one accidentally and then one in just cold-blooded murder. And the same with Rogue One. We're introduced to the character of Andor shooting someone else, so they get rid of the information and he can escape from that situation. He's not the squeaky clean guy. So I think we need to see, this is the concern that I have. It's not that we're finding out more of the Sith and, oh my gosh, more information is going to be bad. It's that I think the real struggle with this kind of story is to make you care about the bad guy, while also not necessarily completely painting the Resistance, or whatever the Jedi Order is going to be called then, as purely evil. Because, as we've seen across the Star Wars galaxy, one cannot truly be evil, but once you start going down that route, it is definitely going to begin to corrupt you. So I think that's the real struggle that Star Wars Acolyte is going to have to overcome. I don't think it's that we're going to see more Sith stories. We've seen more Sith stories, and it's just made people more interested in the Sith. So that's my thoughts on it. And honestly, we know that the story is going to be focused on the dark side users. We don't know if it's going to be a Sith-led focused story, so there's a difference there. But let me know your thoughts. How do you feel about this new foray into Star Wars? Let me know in the comments below. Check out our podcast. May the Force be with you.